All right, so I have my sketch of my idea. I want to think how I can make it clearly different from the beginning to the end, but also where the middle has distinctly different stages too. I don't want it to look all the same through each stage. I want there to be a decipherable change within each shot. So they need to be consistent in placement, and for that you want to use a tripod, you want to use a standard background. They also need to be consistent in lighting, the direction of lighting, the intensity of the lighting. They need to be consistent in focus. So I just use manual for my focus, and I use manual for my shutter speed and manual for my f-stop, so that even if the light conditions change a little bit, all the documentation is truthful. I don't want to use auto exposure, like just all automatic settings, because then as the blue egg turns to white insides of the egg, then the automatic balance of the lighting and the exposure would be different, and then the frames won't match. The ones with the white would be darker than the ones with the blue. So you want to keep that consistency across. Tripod is pretty essential, or some sort of stabilized camera. And then sometimes you need to think of how you're going to block your object. So if I pick up the egg each time and then crack it and then put it back down, I need to make sure I mark on the pillow or on the fabric, whatever I do it against, always to put it in the same place. And I need the same part of the egg to be facing like the top, so it's not twisting in each shot. Otherwise, the twisting becomes the transformation. It would be better if I could just keep it in place and then just crack it and then start to remove pieces in place. But there's always going to be little changes that happen. So here are my tips. Use a tripod. Block your object in for placement. Use manual settings wherever possible. Shoot with the end in mind. So make sure you don't have a transformation that grows beyond your original composition. So even as my egg gets bigger and more broken up, I'm still only going to focus on that one square until eventually maybe there's not much there. Shoot with the end in mind. Let's see. There's one other thing I wanted to mention. It will come to me. All right, so if this is my sketch, then I just have to worry about how I set it up. And you want to think about how long this transformation is going to take. The nice thing about this egg idea is I get to control each step. I pretty much, it's like combing a model's hair. You know, I can work out and pose each shot. But if it's transformation that I don't get to control, like a flower blooming, it might start like that, and then bloom some more, and then bloom some more. And then by the time I get to the end, because I wasn't able to plan it, the flower might look like that, but I'll only have that much of it in my composition. So the biggest tip in setting up your shot is to make sure you have extra room in your exposure. So if this is your intended shot, you know, my egg, I want to make sure that my actual camera frame gives me a lot of room above, below, and to the sides of it. So that if it does change throughout the process, I can line it up after the fact. I'll have enough in my exposure to shrink it a little bit, or move it to the left, move it to the right, move it up, move it down. So shoot with extra space in the frame. And remember, we're cropping down to a square. Now, how do you shoot something that you can't control when it's going to happen? So the flower will bloom, but maybe it blooms all at the end. Well, you have to be really disciplined, and you can use settings in your camera that will do kind of burst settings. It's usually under your shutter speed options. Look at your camera manuals. But that way it will optimize your camera to take rapid shots. You know, you just hold down your shutter speed and it's like rapid fire exposures. And so in that way, that's the best way to shoot kind of high speed changes. And lighting and focusing and all of that can't really change that much, even if you have to use automatic settings when you're in burst settings, because it's all happens so quickly. But other things, you might have to really be disciplined and slow down your exposures. Like maybe you take an exposure every 10 minutes and see if there's any change. We want to end up with 9 good exposures, but you might end up taking 50 in order to get the shots you want. All right, so to test this out, we are going to take some photos, and if we have burst settings on our camera, we'll try them out. We'll just take photos of our faces, and then we'll see how we can line those up in Photoshop. It's really easy. So I'm going to pause the demo now and then pick it back up once I have those exposures. All right, so now I went and got some exposures, like you did. Let's pull them off the camera. I used my sports settings and got 5 shots in rapid succession. And when you use burst settings, it will take, even when in auto settings like auto focus, auto exposure, it will take a light reading from the first shot, and then it will just hold that same f-stop, that same shutter speed through all of the ones in the sequence until eventually your camera will need to process. Now, the more light there is available, the faster that shutter speed can be. Okay, but my face here is the focus. Background's a little blurry, so the aperture is open a little bit. And this isn't so much a transformation as a movement test, but this will teach us how we will kind of crop down and line up all our shots in Photoshop. The nice thing is, just like in my sketch, I have a lot of space around my face. So my face is the thing that's changing, and I have a lot of extra room to help line it up. Okay, so what am I going to do? I will open up Photoshop. I will say File and Scripts, and we are going to load files into a stack. So this is something new. And then we select the files. This is a sequence of exposures from our memory card or the ones I've taken to the desktop. Doesn't matter if you have 50 of them or 5 of them. I'm going to open those up, and I can say attempt to automatically align source images. Sometimes that works. It depends on how much change there is. I'm going to go ahead and try it. It will quickly scan each image, and it will try to line them up. But I'm guessing it's going to line up the ceiling because that's not changing as much as my face. So you see that they're a little offset from each other. Slightly tilted. The ceiling moves a little bit, but it's lining them up. Now let's try it the other way. Don't save that, and we say File, Scripts, load files into a stack, select the files, all in sequence, and then don't check Attempt to automatically align. And then it will just be your full frame. Each exposure has a different layer. So I have 5 layers here for 5 shots. And you see how they'll be in sequence. So the top frame is actually the first frame I took. Then the next, then the next, then the next, then the next. So if this was a flower blooming, this top frame would be the bud, and then the last frame on the bottom would be the bloomed flower. Okay, what we're going to do is use opacity to line them up. So I might try to line up my eyes for each shot. Or I might try to line up the ceiling grid behind me. Because I didn't use a tripod, I was just hand holding. The ceiling's going to shift a little bit. But not too much. So I'm going to take this first frame and I'm just going to use my arrow keys and just nudge it left and right, up and down. Sometimes I might need to transform it. And I'm going to line up the grid of the ceiling. Once that's lined up, I can move to the next one. Take it to 50%. And line up the shot underneath. So we have to pick kind of where we want the grid to be. And now all three of these shots, the ceiling is lined up even though my face is changing. So 50% there, 50% there. Change this one to 50%. I can turn these off for clarity. And I'm going to change the shot underneath to match the other ones that we just did. Interesting portrait I'm getting there. Looks like it needs to move just a little bit more. And this one actually needs to rotate just a tiny bit, so I'll do Command T and I'll just rotate it a little bit. Close enough. Now this one is very different than the last one, so I put this at 50%. And all of these are fairly lined up, some more than others. Let's see. I can keep moving them till all those grid lines work together. And then I just need to line up the last frame, which is way off. So just using the move tool, trying to just get everything lined up. It's kind of using a tripod after the fact. All right, so now I can put them all at 100%. And now I can crop them all into my perfect square. So I use the crop tool, I hold down Shift, I draw a perfect square by holding down Shift that just focuses on my face as the subject. I can use these third lines. I can tighten it up as long as I hold down Shift. I can tighten it towards the middle, holding Shift and Option. And it will cut through all of those layers like a cookie cutter. And now my face should be the main thing that changes. The ceiling shouldn't change that much because I lined them all up. Now I can animate them to see how it looks all together. I just go to Window, I'll do this very fast, Timeline, and you get this. I create a frame by frame animation. I say make frames from layers in the window options. I can set a default timing on all of these. I'll usually use half a second for photography. Then I want to loop through it forever. And it will just go through, and I can use that to examine where things line up and where things don't line up. And then the beauty of it is, if I want to process all of them, I just add adjustment layers. So if I want to get rid of some of the yellow, I can do that, and then it will play across all of the